This is Stephanie Gerald, Lindsay Morris, Sophia Gray, and Jessica Vassallo presenting on the ethics involved regarding torture at Guantanamo Bay. Most people here will remember September 11, 2001, where 2,996 people were killed, making it the largest loss of life by a foreign attack on American soil. In response, President Bush launched a campaign known as the War on Terror. The attacks left Americans wondering, how on earth did this happen? Are we safe? And what can our government do to keep this from happening again? In response, the Bush administration made a drastic move by moving interrogations to Guantanamo Bay. The camp at Guantanamo Bay was actually obtained in 1903 as a military base in Cuba. But after September 11th, it was used as a prison to detain prisoners who have suspected ties to Al-Qaeda. Since 2002, 779 detainees have been held there. Currently only 41 remain. This, of course, was very controversial, as the Bush administration authorized the use of enhanced interrogation techniques on those detainees. This is contrary to what the Geneva Conventions of 1949 state, criminalizing the violence to life and cruel treatment and torture. In 2011, formerly confidential documents were leaked, detailing events at Guantanamo and bringing issues of torture to a more public light. For those curious, torture is defined by the United Nations Convention Against Torture as any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person for such purposes as obtaining from him or a third person information or a confession, punishing him for an act he or a third person has committed or is suspected of having committed. At Guantanamo, there are documents stating that the soldiers have done waterboarding, mock execution, stress positions, sleep deprivation, forced nudity, force feedings, and physical beatings on their prisoners. The issue at hand is, was it ethical for members of the United States government to torture accused tourists at Guantanamo Bay in an attempt to gain information after the attacks on September 11th? The questions of ethics behind this question include, do the actions of Al-Qaeda justify the use of enhanced interrogation in an attempt to save lives? Is there a moral obligation to try to prevent terrorist attacks, and is torture inside the realm of that obligation? And of course, is torture justifiable if those being tortured have inflicted harm on others? There are two possible answers to this that we came up with. One states that torture is justifiable. Those who feel that way argue that it's okay because it could save the lives of thousands. The detainees have been responsible for the injury or death of thousands themselves. The punishment therefore fits the crime. And the ultimate responsibility of government is to protect its people at any cost. The worldviews that we found most believed this were pluralists and postmodernists. Pluralism is a worldview that believes that all religions are equally valid. Pluralists say that although there are vast differences in belief, they should all be able to live peacefully together. And they feel that it is inexcusable for there to be violence committed in the name of religion. Postmodernists state that there is truth in religion, but that varies by culture. Therefore, no one religion should claim superiority and use it as a basis for terrorism. Also, morals are decided by a group on the basis of what meets their needs. Therefore, they would believe that torture is justifiable because the Americans wanted and needed to feel protected. Some ethical theories that helped understand torture being justifiable included utilitarianism, Kantianism, and ideal absolutism. Utilitarianism says that justifying torture is possible because it achieves increased safety for the greatest number of people. Kantianism would justify torture by viewing it as a means for the government to uphold its moral duty to protect its citizens, as previously stated. And ideal absolutism would justify that torture is not necessarily good, but it becomes the lesser of two evils when you have to choose between torture and a terrorist attack. On the other side of the coin, there are many who feel that the torture is not justifiable. Those who feel that way justify that it is not okay because justice is not ours to serve. It requires the torturers to sacrifice their own morality, and one life should not be considered worth more than another. The Christian worldview was most likely to feel that torture was not justifiable. The Bible itself states that vengeance belongs only to the Lord, one should never pay back evil with more evil, and you should never let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good. Some Christian ideals say that because God is a perfect judge, we are not called to judge in his place. We are called to love and forgive others as we have been loved and forgiven, and God created everyone in his image, even the non-believers. Therefore, one human's value and dignity is not worth more than someone else's. Some ethical theories that pertain to those who said it was unjustifiable included situational ethics and virtue ethics. Situational ethics would argue that torture is unjustifiable because, as Martin Luther King believes, it is not the most loving way to respond to the terrorist attacks. Virtue ethics would argue it is unjustifiable by the principles of itself because it does not increase the internal character of the torturer or the tortured. A Christian ethicist named Stanley Hauerwas said, "We do not value life as an end in itself. There is much worth dying for. Rather, all life is valued, even as the lives of our enemies, because God has valued them." In conclusion, our group itself was split 2 and 2 on this issue. We each had firmly held beliefs on the ethics of torture that were not swayed by a group discussion or debate, although the discussion did help us to understand each other's points of view. Obviously, none of us have personal experience with torture, but it would not be unreasonable to assume that our feelings about it might be changed or reaffirmed if we did have any close personal experience with it. Socially, it is likely that our peers' opinions closely reflect our own, and that they're varied and influenced by multiple different ethics, ideals, and worldviews. This is a complicated topic, and it is easy for a person to feel either way. Even amongst ourselves, we found that there were some gray areas that neither of us could perfectly explain away. It would be unlikely to find a group where everyone shared the same opinion on this topic. The worldviews and ethics that each of us used to defend our positions were outlined previously: postmodernism, pluralism, and Christianity. Our differences led us to the conclusions at hand. Thank you for listening to our presentation. Please refer to our discussion boards with further questions.